In one of our leading stories today about Police Minister Bheki Cele releasing the third quarter crime stats, well, let's dive into analysis with Chad Thomas, a crime expert and CEO of IRS Forensic Investigations. Chad, appreciate your time this evening. Now, despite concerted efforts, or alleged concerted efforts, what are the crime statistics for the third quarter of the financial year 2023-24 show an increase in overall crime rates, particularly in violent offences like murder and sexual assault?
We've seen an increase in murders specifically, where we're now seeing about 85 murders a day. And this is of immense concern. It means that, statistically speaking, with the exception of war zones, South Africa now has the highest murder rate in the world. To compound matters even further, only 10% of murders in South Africa are actually solved. That means that 90% of murders go unsolved in South Africa.
Does this also suggest that many of these murders are committed by repeat offenders?
It's highly probable. One must understand that we are sitting with a situation where there is limited to no accountability or consequences for offenders. We know that a lot of offenders reoffend. We also know that our prison system is under immense strain. It's more than 140% capacity at this point in time. What we're seeing is that not enough perpetrators are being brought to book, and that is allowing these crime statistics to grow exponentially, along, of course, with the societal issues such as the huge disparity between the haves and the have-nots and the massive unemployment levels we're experiencing in South Africa.
So let's focus on this a little bit, Chad. How much of these crime figures or the crime stats are due to incompetence or failure by the police force versus social or economic issues that they actually cannot deal with or cannot solve on their own?
All right, so if we put the societal issues apart, the unemployment aside, and don't look at the disparity between the haves and the have-nots, and look at the criminal justice system under a microscope, we're going to find severe failings. And those failings are not intentional. You don't have police officers not wanting to investigate. You don't have prosecutors not wanting a successful prosecution. What you have right now is a perfect storm. We don't have enough qualified police detectives. In fact, the last figure given was that we were 8,000 short detectives just in the SAPS alone. We know that the Hawks are only sitting at about 50% capacity. We heard rumblings at the end of last year that the aspirant prosecutor program had been placed on hold within the NPA, and that advocates that were on contract had not had their contracts renewed. And these were state advocates that worked in specialized units within the NPA. We know that there's not sufficient courtrooms, presiding officers, and court days to hear the sheer volumes of crimes. So as it stands right now, it's not just the police that are failing. It's also the criminal justice system as a whole. Because if we had sufficient qualified detectives to make those arrests, to investigate the cases, and present an evidence-led docket to a prosecutor who then guides that investigating officer to ensure that they have a court-ready case, there just aren't sufficient resources nor infrastructure in place to ensure that there's going to be a successful prosecution. All of this shows perpetrators out there that there is a massive chance of them getting away with crimes. And the most serious crime that we all know throughout the world is murder. And right now in South Africa, 90% of murderers are getting away with their crimes. That is a horrific statistic.
I'd like to focus a little bit on issues around cash and transit heists, for instance, the number of police killings. And all too often, I mean, if we go back, I think it's just almost a year to the day, bar a couple of days, when musician AKA was gunned down in broad daylight in KZN. So let's talk about the brazenry of the criminals in South Africa. I mean, it doesn't happen in many places in the world where criminals will walk up to you in broad daylight and put a gun to your head and walk away, literally.
You know, we used to talk about Colombia in the late 80s, early 90s. That we used to talk about Mexico and Mexico City, specifically with regards to violent crimes, kidnappings, and murder for hire. South Africa is now known as one of the murder for hire capitals in the world. We're now having foreign documentaries being made on our soil for the whole world to see just how bad murder for hire has become in South Africa. And again, it comes down to the fact that our law enforcement members, together with their partners within the National Prosecuting Authority, just don't have the capacity to investigate and to prosecute the sheer number of crimes. At the moment, we're facing a tsunami of violent crimes, and that is the greatest concern, because when one looks at today's statistics, we saw an increase in murder, we saw an increase in attempted murder, we saw an increase in assault with grievous bodily harm. Those are all contact crimes, and that is what is of such concern to us. We know that there's other increases in worldwide. There's a worldwide phenomenon in crimes such as fraud involving cryptocurrency, cyber-type crimes, but that's not contact crimes. South Africa's contact crimes are at an all-time high, and this should be sending a clear message to the state that there's something very, very wrong with the way in which they are trying to tackle this problem. More boots on the ground doesn't equate to more prosecutions. We do need more detectives, and we do need more prosecutors, and we need to see budgets allocated accordingly.
Now, how important is it for the police officers and the various officials in South African Police Service to be qualified or trained properly? I mean, when we take a look at that Senzo Meyiwa murder trial, which has gone on for longer than a decade, one of the things that we look at is the bungling of the police when you're looking at the crime scene and how much that was messed up.
There's a massive skills deficit. It's very disheartening being a forensic investigator, meeting with senior members of the Hawks of the NPA, together with police service members, and hearing that they are taking retirement, that they're close to the end, and knowing that they've been kept so very busy with the cases they're involved in that they haven't been able to transfer those skills. There's a skills deficit at the moment. A lot of members have taken early retirement at 55, and they're getting replaced by members that are fresh out of college. You no longer have what's termed a seasoned or veteran detective. Those chaps are leaving, and they're leaving in droves. A lot of them are leaving because they themselves want to make more of a difference, and they're realizing that with all the critical infrastructure shortages that they face, they can't do their job effectively. A lot of them are being lost to the private sector. A lot of them, as I mentioned, are taking early retirement. But one of the biggest problems I've come across is that there aren't any mentorship programs in place. So there isn't the skills transfer from these veteran detectives who are seasoned in the investigation of crime, and a lot of reliance is being put on members straight out of college who are fresh and haven't had the necessary experience to be able to learn the different skills involved in the detection of crime.
Chad Thomas, appreciate your time. He's a crime expert and CEO of IRS Forensic Investigations, not painting a pretty picture of that analysis of crime stats released earlier today by the Police Minister Bheki Cele.